Hello and welcome for day 3 of the Network Workshop. As you know, here at the Foundation, we work to develop and promote the idea of a circular economy. We engage key actors in the system, all of you, to make it happen, and we mobilize system solutions at scale globally. In this session, we'll be looking at what is the right mix of ingredients to innovate and create those solutions that we can then scale. And I know that the title of this session is about how to scale successful pilots. But when having a few conversations internally with our upstream innovation experts, we realized that actually we're not seeing enough of those pilots yet. So we decided to take a step back and really help you dig into the how. How do we cultivate this innovation culture in a company? And to take you through this session, we have Ella. Ella Headley is our emerging innovator manager here at the Foundation, and she'll be interviewing a couple of speakers today. But just before she does, remember, you can send us your own questions on the right-hand side of the video, and we'll give them to our speakers throughout the session. Ella, over to you.
Thanks, Stella. Today's session is all about how to do upstream innovation, and we're going to get straight on into it. So we're joined by Annette Lendell, who is one of the co-authors of the Upstream Innovation Guide, as well as a reuse and innovation expert here at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And shortly thereafter, we will be joined by Tommy Se-Tho from Nestlé, who will give us his perspective from actually implementing these pilots and these innovation strategies on the ground. So before we kick off this discussion about how we get started with upstream innovation, Annette, can you explain to us what do we mean when we say upstream innovation, and why is it so important to the Foundation right now?
Yes, sure. Hi, Ella. Hi, everyone. So upstream innovation, it's really this opportunity to, instead of deal with a pile of waste, we go upstream and try to prevent it from being created in the first place. So when we talk about upstream innovations, it's all these solutions that happen before the product hit the shelf, right? It's all the things you can do that will actually imply that it doesn't become waste after it's been put on that shelf. And why is it so exciting? Well, clearly, if you don't create waste by design, you also prevent a lot of plastic pollution. So it's the most efficient way of dealing with plastic pollution. One example of that is the SodaStream model, right? So letting users mix their own products at home in a reusable bottle, replacing billions of single-use plastic bottles for fizzy drinks, and also cutting CO2 emissions by almost 90% in the SodaStream case. So we're really seeing that upstream innovation is this opportunity to get on track with your footprint in terms of waste, in terms of CO2, but it's also a really good business opportunity. And there are more and more examples of how these upstream solutions are tapping into changing customer needs. They can be a way to enable technology, plugging in technology, creating better relationships, simply getting ahead of the changing regulation curve that we're seeing, and eventually actually also cutting costs. So it's a business opportunity, and it's really what we want to see in the most efficient way if you want to deal with this pollution crisis that we're facing.
So in many ways, this is actually a whole different way of operating. So what I'm hearing is this is almost, we really need to change our mindsets quite fundamentally if we are to capture the value and the opportunity of upstream innovation.
That's it. We talk about this upstream innovation mindset, actually, and we try to make it clear that upstream innovation requires going beyond these incremental changes to packaging. That has been the traditional focus for companies who are engaging in this field. Like, let's just tweak a little bit here on the packaging and hopefully it'll do a better job or not become waste to the same extent. And what we're seeing now is that we need to go beyond that, right? We need to rethink also the business model, the product, and all the opportunities that arises from that are quite exciting. As I said, both in terms of business value, but also in terms of the environmental impact.
Great. I'm actually going to use this opportunity to plug the Upstream Innovation Guide, which I have in my hands right here. We will be referencing a couple of examples from within the guide, but if you want to dig in deeper, there are more than 100 case studies of upstream innovation in practice through reuse, elimination, and material circulation. You can find the guide. It's linked both within this session description in the community platform and also on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's website. So Annette, it's clear that upstream innovation is a real opportunity to design better solutions for customers, for businesses, but also actually for society and the environment on the whole. But I guess the big question today is actually, how does a company get started with upstream innovation, and what does it take to succeed?
Exactly, right. And this is the question that we were asking ourselves as well when we wrote the guideline. One thing is that we have a lot of cool examples out there that we can feature and hopefully inspire. But then the big question is, how do you do that? How do you get started? As a big corporate, as a smaller corporate, even as a municipality or a public sector actor, or anyone really, how do you do this? So we did some research. And what we found was that across the cases, especially looking at the corporate environment, there seemed to be some key ingredients that show themselves in different shapes and different forms, maybe not all of them at the same time, but at least we found that these 5 key ingredients that we're going to talk about shortly seem to me that if they are put in place up front as a company, you are much more likely to succeed with upstream innovation. So I think it's quite exciting and quite interesting to look a little bit deeper into those so that we make sure that you're actually set up for innovation or set up for success.
Great, and we should soon be seeing on our screens a slide which has all of those 5 key ingredients on it. Can you talk us through some of the examples that led you to pinpoint these 5 key ingredients, starting with company-wide vision and targets? Why is that so important?
Yes. So I think clearly this setting a vision, having targets is maybe, if I were to just pinpoint one of the 5, that might be the most important one, because what we're seeing is that if a company is committed at the CEO level, like we now have in our plastics work of the foundation, the global commitment, these more than 500 organizations signed up towards the same targets, using the same definitions, being required to report transparently each year. This just means that the company is required to come up with the solutions to get there, right? And in many cases, companies don't have these solutions on how to go to 100% reusable, recyclable, or compostable packaging by 2025, or for the businesses that are even more ambitious, like Unilever, who have set this 50% virgin reduction target by 2025. I mean, there's no way that Unilever can know now how they will get there in just a few years. So absolutely, having that target up front requires then that each business unit identifies new ways of solutions or coming up with solutions. So I think setting that target really trickles down at the individual level, at department level, and requires you to come up with new and wild ideas and pursue them.
Great, and then next up we have intrapreneurial culture. Not entrepreneurial culture, but intrapreneurial. So can you explain to me, what do we mean by this? And can I be an intrapreneur? Can you be an intrapreneur?
I'm sure we already are in a way. I would say so, right? So it's really about, we're seeing these companies that succeed. They have created this culture of entrepreneurship. So really encouraging employees to be internal change agents. Instead of relying on entrepreneurs from the outside coming in. That's also a thing, we'll get back to that. But really internally building this culture or capability of people to come up with ideas, encourage them, set up training programs that encourages that. I think something like Coca-Cola, they're now evaluating employees based on skills such as daring to take risk. I think that's such a great example of how a company can enable and kind of nudge the employees to create this mindset of coming up with new and wild ideas that challenge the status quo, because that's often what we need with upstream innovation. As I said, this fundamentally different way of selling products. It does require new and wild ideas and a different mindset. And I think we also have Tommy on the line, so he'll speak more to that, because Nestlé have some great examples of what that could look like.
Okay, so we've got this intrapreneurial culture that's very much an internal, strategy pillar. But can you tell me a bit more about what needs to happen externally? Why is external input so important?
Yeah, so that's also something we saw that these companies that succeed, they welcome external input to a quite large extent. They acknowledge that one thing is to have internal change agents who are set up, who are in the mindset of creating new ideas and following, for example, a design thinking process. But then you also need to invite these external inputs. It can be in the form of having partnerships with startups, innovators, even inviting in NGOs or activists to give their point of view on what a company, a big corporate like Nestlé, Unilever, Coke, should do or could do differently. And we have a lot of successful examples of these like corporate startup partnerships. And yeah, Tommy can also speak to that.
I think
and in the Upstream guide, yeah, you will see plenty of examples of that. I think that's really exciting to see.
I was just going to say exactly the same thing, that the guide is so filled with those examples, and they're so exciting because it really gives these kind of crazy disruptive ideas a real platform and actually demonstrates them working in practice. Next up, we have breaking silos, which, seems like a good idea.
Yeah, it's not rocket science, right? That often the best ideas come from the mix of competencies, the mix of skills, the mix of functions, the mix of brain power. And definitely, we've seen the companies who succeed with upstream innovation, they actively make sure that this agenda of you could say packaging, if that's the target, so circular economy solutions, sits with a mixed team, a cross-functional team, and that it's actively taken forward by this cross-functional team, working across not just competencies, also, for example, in Coca-Cola's case with the upstream. The universal bottle that I love to talk about, the standardized reuse bottle that they have now scaled across Latin America. That idea came from this agile team set up with representatives from all the different business units, but also from different countries to ensure that you had that different perspective on customer trends and needs. So absolutely, like breaking silos is a good idea, and something that should be pursued quite actively when setting up the teams for who to work with this and who to take this forward internally.
Cool. So we have company-wide vision and targets, external input, entrepreneurial culture, and breaking silos. Lastly, you highlight patient capital. What do we mean by this?
Yeah, the reason we call it patience is actually because it's a little bit different what we're seeing on this upstream side compared to, you could say, other R&D projects, other like bringing new products to market. In the case of upstream innovation, as I said, we're often talking about fundamentally new ways of delivering value to users, being it going from liquid to solid, or going to a whole new like a product format that eliminates waste, or going to a reuse model. And this will take longer often to figure out how to do it. It will take a lot of testing and failing and testing and failing, and that patience and that funding kind of upfront to acknowledge, look, we know this is going to take a while, and you go figure it out. As an organization, setting that up is a really good idea. And I think Tommy can also talk to that about what that looks like in Nestlé. But absolutely, like this patience and accepting that innovation takes time and it takes failure, and we need some longer time horizons sometime before we can judge the payback basically of these models.
Great. Thanks so much, Annette, for walking us through these 5 key ingredients. As you know, you can pitch your questions to Annette. She will be joining us for the whole session. So if you can really pick her brains about all things innovation and reuse specifically, of course. Now, how do these enabling conditions, these 5 key ingredients, actually play out in real time in that corporate setting? We have Tommy C. Tho, Research and Development Packaging Lead at Nestlé, joining us to tell us his experience. I'm also going to flag that Tommy is joining us not for the entire duration of the session, so make sure that you do get those questions into him as soon as possible, and we do have a few minutes to then pick his brains. Tommy, I'd love to begin with Nestlé's Ingenious platform, which I know is one of the case studies from within the Upstream Innovation Guide. Can you describe to me what is it, and why does it really help to foster this culture of innovation?
The Ingenious is kind of like it's a platform to pitch. It's a little bit like an internal Shark Tank. Why it works is because you've got the stakeholders, right? These are the key stakeholders sitting and looking at ideas, whereas on the other side, you have a platform for employees to just join in with any idea that they have. So it's an internal platform where these two can kind of collide. Right, you have the key stakeholders with their need and their ask, and you have the employees with their ideas and their creativity coming in as a team. These ideas will then get pitched, and they will then get selected to be funded. Now, I think that's where the patient funding thing comes in as well. These ideas will be funded, and the team itself will be then put together with experts that come from different departments so that they can all work together to kind of make it into a success. Now, for Ingenious or in Nestle, we believe that it is about learning, but it's also about failing fast. So we have to be fast. Here, it's not something that we can drag, So in that platform, once an idea gets passed, we expect it to be launched in 6-9 months, quick, very fast, get it on the shelf, get the learnings, and then, scale from there, hopefully.
And am I right in thinking that anybody from across the business has the opportunity to pitch? It doesn't matter, if they're in an innovation or a research and development role?
Correct. It goes from all the way from the back office, from IT, R&D, all the way down to the operators on the floor, to supply chain. So it really is quite cross.
And that's quite unusual, I guess, because traditionally in a lot of big businesses, it is the role of those innovation and those research and development people, such as yourself, to come up with all the ideas. But in fact, you're actually, I'm imagining, getting that kind of breadth of experience and all of those kind of really particular areas of knowledge that then can influence where Nestle directs its thinking.
Yes, I think so, because it allows people to demonstrate their passion. And you can't get a better team than a team that's passionate about the subject itself. So that's I think that's where the added value comes in as well. These people will make sure to make it a success. We realize, I think, that ideas can be transferred, but not as successfully as if it came from the team. So when driven by passion, I feel this is we have a different type of acceleration when it comes to innovation.
And of course, we've heard Annette speak about patient capital, and you've just spoken to it as well. I wonder, how important is that? How integral is that to the process to have that funding allocated?
I think it's key because it allows the team or the person with the innovation to feel that they have the support, right? And the thing is, when you have an idea, you need to feel like you have multiple types of support, right? You have the drive from coming internally, but you will need the financial support as well as the stakeholder support. And that's where I think Ingenious kind of marries it well together, right? They come up with a budget. It is, that's how much you have, and that's how much we'll give you. You tell us why you need it and how you're going to use it, and it becomes real. The stakeholders are backing you because they are the ones who selected it. So financial fund or financial support and reassurance is one thing that I think it's key if you want to try and if you want to launch anything. We found that in innovations, prototyping is key, right? And in order to get to that stage, you will need funding. Testing is key. Prototyping and testing is key. So all these require funding. This will require some money to be put aside for that growth, for that development.
And I'm jumping about here, but I think it's really interesting, this kind of culture of being able to fail. And I just wondered, how do you make it all right for people to fail? How do people get comfortable with that idea?
Ooh, I don't know if people will actually be comfortable with that idea, right? It's not such a simple, I don't think it's such a simple thing. It doesn't mean that if you get the money, you're okay failing, because that kind of mindset only happens when it's not your idea, I feel, right? When it's your idea, you want it to be successful, and that's really what we want to drive. And in a sense, when you're pitching outside, in Ingenious, when you're pitching to outside of your comfort zone, outside of your department, it feels like a separate project. It's a side project, right? But it's a project that you're passionate about and you want to make successful. So that gives you a little bit of freedom to fail, because it's no longer linked directly to, it's not linked to your direct performance or to your direct. It's a project that you're getting funded for, and you hopefully will succeed. So I'm hoping platforms like that internally within Nestle does kind of help push a little bit the boundaries, allow a little bit for them to fail, without damaging the performance, and hopefully give them that little bit of liberty and that freedom to pursue, to go.
It's really interesting. And I also wonder, can you explain to us kind of a more tangible example of where something's been piloted? I know that, for example, Nestle have piloted with one of our innovators from our network, Miwa.
Yes, yep. And Miwa was a project that was pitched in Ingenious and got funded for it. So I think that's one of the projects that you can see. A team got together, rather an individual wanted to do something in refill. So he did his research, he put a business case together, he pulled a team together, and he presented it with his team on the platform to Ingenious. We've got the stakeholders in front of him. They presented it. It was a 30-minute session, and they after that got out, and the selection happened, and they got funded. It took them, I think, about 6 months, but we managed to get two products on the shelf and in store to test out how the consumer would react, and the results were far better than what we thought. So now we're looking at expanding. We're looking at what we can do. There are still things to solve, but it gave us the kickstart. Right, there are always things to solve. For it to be scaled up into a sustainable business, there's so many things that come in. Right, one of the things we can't control is whether the consumer is going to go back and fill. All these things you can't control, but you can only test. Keep testing, keep going, and hopefully you find that business model that could work, like what we call creating shared value. Right, it's a shared value between us, the consumer, the customer.
I've got a tricky final question for you. Sure. Before we hand over to audience questions. I was wondering, what do you think it takes for a pilot to go from this initial idea to a point of scaling so that it's, a part of day-to-day operations of a massive company like Nestle? And actually, as a second point to that question, do you think that it's different for circular economy innovation? Are those ingredients different? Are the timescales different? Do you see that there are changes there?
I think it's not that. It's not that tricky of a question, just because we've seen this happen, and we know kind of the time scale of how fast it's happening. I draw back to the big changes, the business that have big changes. The companies like Amazon, like Tesla, when did they start, right? And when did they hit the volumes that they need, and how did they suddenly scale up? The timeline is the same. We're starting a new business here. It's a new business model. There is consumer behavior change, just like Tesla and just like Amazon, and it will take time. But what we do see is that consumer adoption is getting faster, just because information is getting faster, right? The information getting through the world, it's just going at a faster rate. So I can only tell you that it will be faster than before. How fast, we'll have to see. We'll have to see when the business gets to a number which makes sense.
Exciting. So I'm going to hand over now to Stella to see if we've had any questions in from the audience.
Thanks, Ella. And yes, we have had a few questions come in. The first one, very bluntly, how do you measure a successful pilot, Tommy? What are your performance indicators there? I think we have to measure it. Well, we're trying to figure it out internally on the details, but I can tell you there are a few things that are big that we should be measuring. One, how feasible is it, right? As a business, how feasible is it? Two, how feasible it is to make. It's a new business model, so we have to know how feasible it is, say, operation, technically speaking, like how feasible is it for it to be made? Can it actually be made at a big volume? And finally, does the consumer desire it, or does the customer want it? So these are kind of the key fields that we're looking at. I don't have the details because we are figuring it out as well, but these are kind of the key areas that we look at to see
whether it will become a success, because it will never become a success if the consumer doesn't desire it, or if the customer doesn't want it, and it won't be a success if we can't make it, and also it won't be a success if a business cannot be profitable at the end, right?
And maybe to that point, Tommy, how much or to which extent do you actually engage the customers in that process? How much do you seek feedback from them? And in a pilot, how do you identify which geography in which market you will be starting this pilot in? And how do you start this dialogue with this key market that you've chosen?
For a company like us, because we are kind of present everywhere, and I think I go back. I'll take a step back and I'll go back to the point you were discussing earlier. We have to try. We have to decide, we have to try at different areas and because different consumers are different. So wherever we try, we engage with our customers, right? Sometimes there is a push from the customer that comes to us and they say, look, I'm very interested. Can we please discuss how to do it? We do it. Sometimes we see an opportunity based on the market and the need from in a sense, it's the country. Yes, based on the country needs, we might look at it and we say, okay, I think there is an opportunity here to look at, and then we actively engage with the customer. So where we decide to do it, really, I think right now we're at a stage where it's proliferating a little bit, and we're allowing it to proliferate while we're building a strategy to see what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, right? If, however, the opportunity is too small, because a lot of effort and a lot of funding needs to go into it, then we might not look at it at all.
Thanks, Tommy. I've got one more, and maybe we can hear both your thoughts, Tommy, and Annette's thoughts on this question. How can we avoid this analysis paralysis and jump into small-scale pilots sooner? Just have more of them and really encourage everyone to learn and fail, as you were talking about earlier.
Do you want to go, Annette?
Mind starting? Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, how can we avoid that perilous? I mean, I think it has a lot to do with some of the things we talk about, like the internal culture, basically like having KPIs that we need to test something. So you just need to get some action off the ground, as Tommy was saying. But it's also often about understanding that a pilot is not necessarily, at least in its first stages, it's not necessarily the test of the full successful system, right? It's often a test of a simplified system, so a minimal viable product. And it's often set up in such a way, or at least it should be set up in such a way, that it's very explicit what it is that you're trying to test. Are you testing the customer uptake, as Tommy was talking about? Is that the focus of the pilot? Well, then forget about the operational side, right? Then you can stand back end and like pour from a single-use packaging into a bulk, if that's what if the other thing is the focus. And on the other hand, if you want to test, is this going to work operationally? Can this even be clean? Let's focus on that, and then not kind of be discouraged by the customer uptake because we didn't focus on designing campaigns or guiding them or taking them by the hand. And I think that's important with pilots often, to break them a little bit down and be very specific about which barriers it is that you as a company are most discouraged by or most kind of in the dark about. Focus on them, test them one by one, and like slowly build up an understanding of what a full system could look like. So we don't get discouraged from the start and think that we should just judge the viability upfront, environmentally, economically, operationally. But yeah, really try to break it down in smaller chunks and be very clear and specific on what it is that we're piloting. I think that could help.
Yeah, and I think a very good point, Annette, and I'm going to build on what Annette just mentioned as well. I think what I saw as one of the better ways to do it is, for example, in Ingenious, once the idea is pitched, a date is set. When in project management, when a date is set, a date is set. There are people you need to answer to if you don't fit with the date. So that kind of helps as well with analysis paralysis, because what happens most of the time is that we analyze so much you forget what the main aim is, what the three goals are. So these are, I feel, basic project management. And sometimes if in front of the right stakeholders, you've promised the date you need to deliver. So that helps.
Yeah, that's a great point, really. This maybe like this whole mindset of the design thinking process or a sprint process where you set a fixed time and you have phases for each thing, like research, prototyping, testing, and so on. And like you have that week or you have those months and then that's over and you move on. I think that's a good point as well.
We have a few others, a question coming in, but I'm also mindful that you might have to go, Tommy. Do we have time for one more, or is it a hot stop?
I think so. No, I think I can take one more and then I'll go.
Thank you so much. We have a very specific question for you, Tommy. Do you have any pilots to phase out colored PET for consumer goods? Your water Perrier is one example, because it's nearly impossible to recycle. The comment is that would sound like an easy upstream win.
To phase out colored PET? Yeah. I think so, but I don't know if it's public. But I'll tell you something though. From my end, we are looking at completely, or from my end, at least my job as reusables, is to completely eliminate packaging, right? Or waste, sorry, completely eliminate waste. So it's to reuse, and personally, I believe in that concept. So whether we're going to phase out from colored PET as a whole, I don't think I'm the right person to answer. I've got my colleague, but you're going to need to ask her. From my point of view, we're trying to see if we can reuse them and completely, have a zero waste type of mindset.
Well, thanks for that honest answer. Really helpful and really nice to have you. I'll hand over to Ella now. Thank you.
So I'm going to move, huh?
Thanks, Tommy. So we have come to the end of the session now. Thank you for joining us. But before we go, I'd like to ask Annette, everybody's really inspired. They've heard these great examples. They've heard from Nestlé about their processes and the systems that they have in place to make innovation easier to happen. Perhaps they've visited the guide and they've seen some examples and they're really raring to go. What's the key takeaway that you have for them after this session, or a piece of advice that you'd like them to leave with?
Yeah, that's always difficult, right, to highlight one thing, but it might be that, think about these enabling conditions that we talk about, think about how to set them up, if not already in place. And then next, it's really about getting going, right? We need you to just get going. And I would maybe make a call out to all the assets that we created to support you in this journey. So one thing is the guide, a PDF document like packed with cases and numbers and questions and answers. But in addition to that, we actually tried to make some quite hands-on tools, like a database on our website where you can enter the market that you're interested in or the product category you're interested in and see all the cool examples only for that. Or a slide that you can use if you want to do a presentation internally about this, or even a full workshop guide on how to set up an ideation process that can help you identify pilot concepts with questions asked by us. So it would be like we would be there with you without being there, to help you kind of go in the right direction and hopefully land on some really cool pilot concepts that you can start testing as soon as possible, please.
Great final words, I think. Thank you so much, Annette. All these 5 key ingredients and many of the examples, as Annette mentioned, can be found in the Upstream Innovation Guide, which can be found on the community platform. And we have a quick update for you from Kimberly on the community platform now.
Hello, I'm here today to give you 2 tips on how to make the most of our community platform. And also I wanted to highlight and tell you more information about the Circular Economy Advanced series, which is due to start on the 12th of April. First of all, if you want to search the platform by topics, you can do this by selecting the badges, which you can see on posts. So as you can see on here, there is a badge that's called plastics. And if you click on this badge, you can see all content that has been tagged with the topic plastics. So this is just an easy way to navigate the platform outside the channels or the rooms. Second of all, I wanted to show you that you can be notified of everything that's being posted on the platform. If you go to the channel or the room that you want to be notified about, and there's a watch button at the top here. So if you click this watch button, you will get notified about any new content within that room or channel. Lastly, I wanted to tell you more information about the Circular Economy Advanced series, which is due to start on the 12th of April. This is a 5-week program that we've specifically designed for circular economy professionals who already have a good working knowledge of the circular economy. The program will be completely run on a private room on our community platform, and it will be based on 5 areas, which are strategy, people and skills, operations, supplier engagement, and innovation. So this will run for 5 weeks, and every Wednesday there will be a live session where you can join. So yeah, registrations are open, so please contact your primary contact if you want to join. And if you are the primary contact, you can find this registration link within the primary contact room on the platform. So thanks, that's all 3 things that I wanted to highlight today. If you have any questions, please send them in through the platform using the chat box on the bottom right hand of your screen. Thank you.
That's it for today, but tomorrow we will be back. For all the Portuguese speakers in the network, we will have an update from the LATAM team at 12:30 UK time on the city recovery and circular economy. Whereas if English is more your cup of tea, we're back at 2 p.m. UK time with the plastics pacts to hear about how they're being implemented at a local level. Thank you so much for watching.